All right, well, I'll go ahead and start with an intro. So thank you all for coming today. My name is Stephanie Taylor, and I am in the Google San Francisco office. I've been at Google now for over 10 years. I've been on the same team that entire time, which is very unusual. I've been on the Google open source team this whole time, working in outreach. So I have been working on Google Summer Code in some context for that whole time. I started out just kind of helping somebody else who was running it. And then I also ran the Google Code-In program, which was a similar program, but for high school students. So students 13 to 17 years old that we ran for 10 years, and we wrapped up the final year last year. But for the last 5 or 6 years now, I think, I have been leading the Google Summer of Code program as well. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you all about today. So let's get started. And then I'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end for you. Oh, there we go. So like I said, I worked on the open source team. So I always like to start this presentation with what is open source. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with it, but just in case you aren't, open source is computer software where source code is distributed under an open source license, allowing that anyone to study it, change it, improve it, and then distribute that software. Another key component of open source is really that it promotes collaboration. It's all about working with others towards a common goal. And therefore, you have a community of dedicated developers. Now, there are tons, like many thousands, tens of thousands probably at this point, of different open source projects / organizations. Normally, they call them open source projects. We use the term open source organization, and you'll see why in a minute, just it's easier to say that way for us. But there's all kinds of projects, big and small, all kinds of different kind of work that they're doing, from robotics to gaming to cloud to security to humanitarian efforts. So there really is something for everyone. So now, what specifically is Google Summer of Code? Now, Google Summer of Code is a program that we designed. It's always been entirely online. So this is not something that's just changed in the last year due to the pandemic. For the last 17 years, the program has been entirely online. It's international, designed to encourage students to participate in open source software development, and they actually have mentors there to guide them throughout their Google Summer of Code experience. And these mentors are part of these open source communities. So these are people familiar with these open source organizations and the ins and outs, and they're really there to help guide the student and help them succeed. Now, the other part about GSoC is you do also earn a stipend. So a lot of people kind of call it an externship, and that's essentially what it is, right? So it's not an internship with Google or anything like that, but it's more along the lines of similar to an internship with the open source organization. It's just that Google is the one that is organizing the program and the one that actually will send you the money. But for all other purposes, you're essentially working directly with that open source organization and their community, and using their version control and learning their documentation, how to use the software, and then of course how to contribute to it. So you really are working with this open source organization. Now, we kind of expanded the eligibility this year, so now it's post-secondary students, so meaning students in a post-secondary academic program. A lot of words there. And essentially what that means is students after high school, right? Whether that's university, whether you're doing a coding camp, some other kind of academic program. It can be a part-time program, that's fine, but as long as you're still essentially a learner in some way and enrolled in an institution, then you can participate. We'll go a little bit more into eligibility here in a second. But there are many different aspects of GSoC. So, we call it Google Summer of Code because initially it was built around the idea that students, weren't using their coding skills as much during the summer when they got out of university. So when they took that 3 or 4 month break, or 2 months, depending on where you're at, their skills were kind of getting rusty. So the idea was, let's keep students coding during the summer, so during that time between their semesters, so that they keep their skills sharp. That's initially kind of how it started. It's kind of expanded over the years, but that's the intention of why we call it Google Summer of Code and why it occurs when it does there, well, it's in the summer, I guess, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere. We get that a lot. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it's in your winter. But it's really about learning how to contribute and be a part of this community of dedicated developers in the open source world. Now, these are just some of the different types of skills that students will learn or maybe just kind of improve upon during GSoC. And these are things that students have told us themselves. So we ask for a lot of different feedback at different points during the program. And these are the things that come up the most often. Obviously, real-world experience is a big one, because in university, you're often taught how to do something, so it's more theoretical. And this professors might give you a, like I said, a theoretical kind of idea or problem, or create a fake project for you, but you're not really using all of the skills needed to successfully integrate into an open source project or any kind of project, right? Obviously, ours is specifically about open source for Google Summer Code, but it really is just improving upon your skills for you. So you're also going to learn things like time management, right? That's always a good thing for everybody. Distributed development, because most likely your mentors are all around the world. So the mentors you're going to work with in their community could be spread out between Poland and Australia and China, Brazil. They really are going to most likely be all over the world, all different time zones. So that's a great skill to learn, especially in this global economy. And testing, another skill often not utilized that much during your studies. A lot of students have told us that they really never did testing before. And so that's one of the first things you're going to learn, and the importance of it. And of course, on those same lines, the importance of version control. So if lots of people are working on the code at the same time, you don't want to overwrite somebody else's work. So you're going to learn about that. Most of them do use GitHub, but there are a few others out there as well. So you'll learn whatever specific to that open source community. You're definitely going to build your network, which will help you hopefully later on making more connections, maybe getting a job or helping you find a scholarship or whatever your case might be. And then, of course, this one came up actually quite a bit last year, which I thought was interesting and I had never really thought of before, but it's true. Just working with large code bases. That's something that you don't generally get a lot of experience doing. And with GSoC, a lot of these projects have been around a long time, or just very large projects that could be newer, but a lot of people are contributing to them. So you really are going to be working with large code bases pretty often. So now some of the specific goals. Number one is really introducing students to open source software development. We want to get more students involved in open source. So hopefully they come into GSoC, they enjoy it, and then even after their GSoC program ends, they either stay involved with their community, maybe they go and start their own project, or maybe they go and tell others about it, right? That's kind of the key. We really want more people involved in open source, because that's just better for the world in general. The more people involved, the more cool things happen, and the faster they happen. So we also, with GSoC, another goal is really helping these open source projects bring in new, excited developers who hopefully will stay after the program, right? They always need new ideas. And, some of these projects have been around for 20 plus years, and they need new people coming in. And even projects that are just 2 or 3 years old, they need more people, right? So they need new perspectives from people of different ages, of different backgrounds, from all around the world. They need that to help their software be better. And then just giving students real world software development exposure. So, like I said earlier, you're also going to learn about software licensing. That's one I didn't mention. That is something that is very important, and you will learn about that, or at least specifically the one that your open source organization uses during the program. And of course, the end goal is also creating more open source code for everybody to be able to use. So kind of how does this work? There are multiple stages of the program. Back in January and February, these open source software projects applied to be mentor organizations. Then we, Google, chose 202 of that 400 organizations to be a part of GSoC this year. And then right now, until next Tuesday, April 13th, at 1800 UTC, the students are applying to the program. And what applying means is submitting a project proposal to a specific organization. And what that is, I kind of mentioned this earlier when I was asked to do this talk, is that it's almost too late to apply to be this part of the program this year. It is possible to get accepted, but I wanted to go ahead and really kind of talk to you about it this year. So to put this in your mind, so hopefully maybe next year more of you will be able to participate. That's not to say that you can't apply. It's just you're going to be very busy over the next few days to get all the things done that you need to get done. It's not simply registering and entering, your name and address or whatever, or university or school into the system. You have to actually write a project proposal based on one of the project ideas that these mentor organizations have posted to our site. And we'll go into that a little bit more in a second. But that's kind of the registration process. And then mentors will review all of those. So after April 13th, for a couple of weeks, they're going to look at all of the applications they've received from students, these proposals. They'll decide which ones they plan to accept. And then on May 17th, so a little over a month, is when we announce which students are going to be paired with the mentors of the different open source projects. And then students spend about 3 weeks during what we call the community bonding phase, kind of getting to know the community, reading up on documentation, working with their mentor on figuring out what the milestones are going to be for the 10-week program. And then they start actually coding on June 7th. And then that runs until mid-August. So now we do have evaluations. There are 2 evaluations during the program. Students do have to pass those evaluations. If they don't pass, then they are removed from the program and they don't receive a stipend. So most students pass the program, and the reasons you don't pass generally, so people get freaked out when they see this, but really the reasons you don't pass are because you aren't doing the work, right? Some people just kind of disappear at some point, and so clearly they're not going to pass if they've done 5 hours of work and then they just disappear. Other students kind of just bite off a lot more than they can chew, and they kind of oversold their abilities, and so it's pretty clear usually from the first week or 2 that they just aren't going to be able to come even close to accomplishing the goals that they set forth in their project proposal. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to actually complete the project in order to still pass the program. The organizations and the mentors realize that sometimes a project is just bigger than they thought it was, so you can start working on your project, and sometimes you and your mentor might say, oh, this is a really cool path. Maybe you want to kind of move the project more in this direction. So you kind of change the breadth of the project. So you may not actually kind of have a finished point or finished project. In some cases, students actually work on it 1 year and then come back the second year to finish off the project. So one thing to keep in mind is you are eligible to be accepted into GSoC up to 2 times. So if you were accepted this year, you could also be accepted next year or maybe 2 years from now, assuming you are still meeting all of the eligibility requirements around being a student, etc. And then after you pass each evaluation, and that's when you receive the stipend. So if you pass the first evaluation, which is done at the end of 5 weeks, so the halfway point of the program, then you receive 45% of the stipend amount. And if you pass the second evaluation, then you receive the final 55% of the stipend. Now, like I said, we've expanded the eligibility for the program this year. These are the main takeaways. Number one, you have to be over 18 upon registration for the program. So, for example, if you're registering tomorrow, you need to be 18 tomorrow and meet all the rest of these requirements. If you were 17 today but turn 18 tomorrow and meet the rest of the requirements, then you're good to go. Just wait until tomorrow to register. You have to be accepted into or enrolled in a post-secondary educational program by May 17th. Or, we've added this year, you could have graduated from a post-secondary program between December 1st, 2020 and May 17th. So if you're graduating next week or you graduated 2 months ago from a post-secondary educational program, then you are also eligible this year. And you've got to be eligible to work in the country in which you reside because that's where you're going to be working on the project. And again, you can only be accepted a maximum of 2 times, so you can only be accepted, no more than once to be able to eligible for this year. And you can't be resident of a U.S. embargoed country. All right. Now, these are a couple of the most common questions. We do have a FAQ on our site as well, but these two come up a lot. How much time do I have to spend on the project? So we've changed the project this year. It's actually half of the time commitment required. And so now you need to spend about 175 hours over 10 weeks. Previously, it had been about 350 hours over 12 weeks. So we have cut the time in half and then also given a little bit more leeway there in the timing. So students, you and your mentor might decide that you want to do about 17 to 18 hours a week of work, or you might decide, hey, we're going to do 3 hours or 30 hours a few weeks and then take about a week and a half off, at some point, whether it's in the middle of the program or wherever for a break, or maybe you have exams if you're still doing studies this summer or your exams run into June, which I know happens for a lot of folks. So there really is a lot of flexibility this year. So we're pretty excited about that and to see how that will help students and mentors moving forward this year. And another question, if you're new to open source, can you participate? Yes, that's part of the point, right? Like, we want you to participate if you're new. The key is just being excited to learn more, right? The mentor's there to help you, and they want to help you succeed, right? They want to help you learn, and they're excited to have you be a part of their community. So if you're showing that you're excited about learning more about the project and participating, and you haven't done anything with open source before, that's fine. You do need to have some kind of post-secondary level programming. So if you just started to learn to code 3 weeks ago, that's not going to work, right? But they don't expect you to be, professional, coders at this point, right? They know you're learning. So really the key is just being excited to learn more. But if you're going to work with an organization that, for example, uses Python, then you need to know how to use Python. You're not going to need to know every in and out of Python, but you need to at least know the basics, right? You can't be applying to an organization that uses Python when all you know is C++. That's not going to work for anybody. Here's the timeline. So I kind of mentioned most of this earlier, but right now until April 13th at 1800 UTC, the applications are open. So these are a couple things to think about. You do have to apply as an individual. Teams are not allowed. While you will be working with the community of the open source organization, and there might be other students that are also accepted in that organization, and you might be kind of not working together, but bouncing ideas off of each other, etc. You are applying as an individual, so you will not be this is not a team project. And also keep in mind that less than 20% of students that actually submit their final proposals usually get accepted into the program. So if if you apply and aren't accepted, don't be discouraged. It just means, next year start, preparing a little bit earlier, start investigating the organizations and, reaching out earlier. One of the things that we tell people time and time again, and that's why I have it in all caps in the bottom here, is communicate, communicate, communicate. It's something the students also say, communication is key. The mentors say it as well. It really is about communicating. Because you are working remotely, people can't read your mind. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know what you don't know. So if you have a question, ask. First you should always, try to find the answer, but don't spend 4 hours trying to look for the answer. If you can't find it after doing some research for, 20 minutes or something, then, you can ask the community, because these are all open source projects. They all have community channels, whether they're using Slack or Discourse or IRC or a group email. They all have a large or some size community. I say large, not necessarily. It could be 5 to 10 people, or it could be 500 people on these community threads that are there that can answer some kind of basic questions, in addition to your mentor or mentors that are assigned to help you specifically for your project. So these are some stats from students from last year. At the end of the program, we asked a bunch of different questions. Almost 95% of the students said that GSoC improved their programming skills. 94% plan to continue with the mentoring organization they worked with after GSoC ended. And 26% had never participated in open source in any way before GSoC. And I just kind of have a couple of quotes on here. I thought the second one was pretty cool. For the first time, I built purely functional code from scratch. Used a lot of different cool open source software, 14 different ones, and even tried my hand at front-end development. This has been a tremendous learning experience for me. And then the other one I thought was cool was the final one. The perspective I have about technology now isn't just about how good the code is. Now I care much more about how it helps the community. I'm more aware of the practical implications of technology. So those are all very key things that I thought kind of summed up GSoC and were important to post up here for y'all. And just a couple final things here. Google Summer of Code. So in the previous 16 years, we've had 16,000 plus students from 111 countries that have been accepted into the program, with 715 open source organizations. And over 38 million lines of code have been produced. Now, this next link has all the main important links. The most important one is the top one, this website, because everything else you can get to from there. The second one, the student guide, is also incredibly important. I encourage people to read that, even if you at least just read the first few sections. I know it says guide, and people are like, oh, another guide. But fortunately, it's very short. Like, each chapter is kind of a page. So it was written by former students, mentors, organization administrators, and me and some other Google program administrators. And it was written initially, I think, 11 or 12 years ago. And then we've updated each year. But the cool thing is, because the program has stayed more or less the same, and it still works, right? Like, it's still the same concepts. So we highly encourage you to read that. And of course, if you want to check out our open source blog. And the final bullet there is the GSoC-support@google.com. That is our support email that myself and I have one other team member that works on GSoC with me. And so one of us can answer your questions for you. One thing here before we go into questions, I did look it up because I was curious to see how many students we'd had from Lebanon accepted in the program. And that's why another reason why I said yes to this meeting, because we've only had one, and that was last year. So I do hope we get a bunch of y'all to apply. Again, if you haven't already been checking out the website and looking at the different organizations and looking into that, it's not too late, but you've got to start it today, right? You need to look at the organizations, look at their list of project ideas, find the one or two that interest you, and then you can either write your project proposal. The key, though, is to try to reach out to that organization, but at this point, they might be so overwhelmed with so many people asking questions in these final days, they may not have time to get back to you right away. So go ahead and try. It's possible. Some of them might just be, using their Slack channel or whatever, and so you're more likely to be able to get a pretty quick answer. But that is the key to successful application, is reaching out early. Like I said, it's not too late. It's getting too late almost, but if you apply next year, be sure to reach out as soon as we mention or we announce who the organizations are. Reach out to them, start investigating them like that day or the next day, and start reaching out early, because that is the key. So even before the student applications open, which there's about 3 weeks between when we announce the mentoring organizations and when students can start to apply, that 3 weeks is really important to spend figuring out, maybe 2 or 3 organizations that interest you, looking at those project ideas, and then reaching out about the ones that are really interesting to you, and getting some early feedback from those organizations. That's the best advice that I can give. Again, it's not too late if you really kind of put your mind to it right now and really put your head down and focus on writing a good proposal. Because a proposal is not just saying, hey, this is my resume, this is what I've done. That's actually not a proposal. People do that and they get rejected right away, pretty much. But it's about writing the proposal based on the project idea. It's about writing how you would tackle that idea. And in our student guide, there are very specific pointers. Like I would say, just if you read nothing else, read that page, right? That tell you how to write a good proposal, the things to keep in mind, the things not to do, right? So at least check that out if you do nothing else. So yeah, I'm going to open it now for some questions. So I will stop sharing this so I can see your faces. Maybe.
Okay, someone asked in the chat if he can submit more than one project proposal. Fuad?
More than one? Yes, good question. Yes, so you can submit up to 3 project proposals. So you can submit 2 to the same organization if you want, or you can submit 1 to 3 different organizations. So yeah, but that is a good question. Any other questions? Yeah, so yeah, it is going to be basically 175 hours over the 10 weeks. Now, that can be up to you and your mentor to work together to figure out what that looks like. So if you, for example, have classes on, Tuesdays and Thursdays, then maybe on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and maybe even on the weekend, that's when you're doing the majority of your work. Mentors don't generally care. That's fine. Just let them know, right? It's really about communicating, letting them know, hey, I have finals this week or midterms this week and this week, so I know I'm not going to be able to work as much those weeks, and that's fine. Just let them know. Do we have to communicate with organization mentors before submitting the proposals? You don't have to. The most successful proposals do, but like I said, at this point, because it's only a few days before the end of the proposal period, you could try to reach out. They may or may not have time to respond because so many people are asking questions these final few days. But it doesn't hurt to try. And honestly, some of the organizations are less popular is the right way to say it, but they have less people applying to them than others. So they might have the time to be able to respond to you, or they just have a lot more mentors available to be able to answer questions. So I would definitely try to ask questions. And if you don't, if you don't hear back from them, don't waste too much time and just go ahead and try to write the best proposal you can without that feedback. Do the organizations give us ideas for the projects, or is it our responsibility? Yeah, so at the program site at g.co/GSoC, there's a list of organizations or a link to organizations. You open it, and then you'll see all 202 organizations. One thing I didn't mention is that you might not know where to start. Like, how do you get it down from 202 organizations to 2 or 3 that might be interesting? There are different filters, including things like programming language. So if you're just looking for project in C++, you can filter by that, or Python, or whatever. You can also filter or sort by like cloud projects versus, we have about 7 or 8 different categories. So there's cloud, there's databases, there's security. So you can kind of narrow it down that way. If you already know what organization you want, you can, if there's 1 or 2 that are interesting to you, you can do a search to see if they're part of GSoC. You can also relatively quickly look on the main organization page. Each organization has written a basically 7 to 10 word description of what their org does. So you can scan through those really quickly to see if something kind of pops out at you. I will say though that some of those are not the best descriptions. I don't think they put as much time into those descriptions as they probably should have, because some of them you read and you're like, what does that even mean? So I will put that disclaimer out there that if you see that, don't get freaked out. Also, each organization has a link to their project ideas once you open up their page. Also, there's a link to their communication methods. So whether, again, that's a chat channel or that's sending an email, those are all listed on their homepage. So it's pretty straightforward to see how they want you to communicate. And on their homepage, they often even have very specific instructions on sometimes even how to do your proposal. So if you are going to write a proposal, check there, because they might have a template. Some of the organizations that have been around for a long time actually have a very specific template of what they want folks, how they want folks to write their proposals. And occasionally, you might have, well, not occasionally, more often these days, there might be an organization that asks you to do a pull request. And they basically have some minimum requirement, because they want to make sure that students can at least do a pull request, right? Because sometimes people will register and write a wonderful, beautiful proposal, but they can't actually do any kind of coding at all. So it basically becomes clear right away that it's not going to be a good situation for anybody, and then that student's going to fail. And then that really is a bummer for the mentors, because they were looking forward to mentoring a student, but also that means they lost a student. They could have had somebody else who was, I don't know if capable is the right word, but who was able to code and they wanted to be a part of their program, their community for the summer. So that's why writing a good proposal is important, but that's why the communication is such a big part of the program. So I can't say that enough. And again, it's what we hear from the mentors and the students every year, because I think the students don't believe me sometimes, and they're like, okay, yep, you're right, the communication is key for everybody's happiness. Because again, if the student has something else going on in their life, they don't have to tell this mentor the specifics, but they can be like, I've got some family issues going on this week. I'm not going to be working on this as much. And that's a much better situation to tell the mentor ahead of time than to kind of disappear. And the mentor's like, well, what's going on? Is the student okay? Did they just disappear? Are they not coming back? What happened? And since we are still in a pandemic, you don't know what is going on in people's lives. So if you're having a problem or a issue, just let the mentor know. Again, they don't want to know all the details, but they just need to know that, hey, you can the next few days there's stuff going on. I'm going to be kind of in and out, or I'm not going to be able to get online for a few days, but I will be back on Saturday, and that's all they need to know, right? Any other questions? And thank y'all all for joining this evening. I know it's at 7:30 p.m. your time.
Thank you for your time and this beautiful presentation. We enjoyed it very much. Hopefully, we will try to apply, and if not, we'll work to apply on next year.
Perfect. Yeah, and the key is, and now that all of you know a little bit about it, then hopefully you can tell your friends or tell your teachers, because a lot of it, people hear about GSoC usually from other students who have participated, or maybe from mentors who are also teachers or that kind of thing. So a lot of it really is about mouth and people understanding why it's important and why it's a cool program. So spread the word to others. But I definitely would love to see some of y'all, get in this year. That'd be awesome. And hopefully next year, even more of you will apply and get into the program.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Someone asked me if we have a pro- previous proposal we can see to see how we can make a proposal, how it will be look like.
Yeah, so if you go to the GSoC student guide, to the main homepage, and then there's a help. So g.co/GSoC, and then at the bottom there's a help link, and if you can click on help, it'll take you, and there are a whole bunch of different documents listed, and you can click on the guides. In the student guide, there's a whole section on writing a good proposal. So it gives you, I believe there's also an example in there, but it gives you all the things you should do. And then the other thing is definitely, like I said, look at the organization to see if they have a specific template, and or if they may require you to do a pull request or some minor something. For some of them, that is actually part of the application as well. They do require that to help them kind of narrow it down. So just be sure to check that out.
Okay.
It's okay if we are still junior, not professional developers. The answer to that is yes. Again, they know you're still learning, right? And that's great. They enjoy teaching students, so that's fine. It's just, again, you do need to have some skills. You can't just be, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks into learning how to code. Often I suggest, you can apply technically. So students who are high school students can apply if they are 18 and are studies in the fall. That usually, very few of those students, I think, get accepted, unless they just happen to be students who've been coding for quite a while on their own, which, some people are self-taught or have been in coding clubs since they were 6, I guess. But that's not normal for most folks. So I usually encourage folks, if you're in like a college, university program, etc., to probably have at least 1 year kind of experience before applying, but you don't have to. Right. And if you're doing like a coding camp, obviously you're very focused, and everything's done in a much shorter period of time. It's just very, very fast and a lot of very concentrated. So if you're at least, probably halfway to 2/3 of the way through your coding program, then you should be good too. If the project's big, is it okay if we have someone outside the competition help us? No. It is a project for you to work on. And it's not a project, again, it's not a team project. It's all about you working on the project, and there are mentors there to help guide you and help you find the right answers, and teach you to, they can't teach you everything if you don't know anything, but they're there to help you find the answers and help you teach you kind of the right way, and kind of hopefully teach some good coding habits and things like that as well. Any other questions? Anything else, anyone? Okay, someone, Nimat put yes. Yes to, yeah, there we go. How should we put ideas in the proposal? So like I said, the organization has their ideas that they want students to work on. So it could be like, I don't know, fixing the front end on whatever, their site or something. So you're going to be writing a proposal based on how you would do that, and kind of like what you're thinking, but also your proposal can include why you want to work on this project, why this organization is interesting to you. So like, for example, maybe you choose OpenMRS, which is a humanitarian project. And, you're like, well, this is really important to me. They're doing great work. And, so you kind of like write things about that. So it's sort of like an interview kind of. But you're putting it all on paper, right? And it's also really kind of how you would do the project. And it doesn't, they don't need to have every detail, but they just kind of want to see that you kind of get the idea of what the project consists of, right? That you kind of get the general idea. Obviously, you and your mentor will, if you get accepted, will narrow it down and, you figure out the exact milestones and deliverables and all of that for the weeks of the program. But it's just about how you would tackle it. But then, okay, this is kind of how your thought process is. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So if I work full time, I'd love to participate, but may need help. Yeah, no, you can't. Yeah, you can't do that. So, I mean, if you're working full time, then it might not be the right program for you, or at least not this year. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. Cool. Any other questions? This is great. I like when people have questions. I mean, it is still weird that I have to do all the questions in chat because that means I'm just talking nonstop. So it's very weird for me. I'm used to being able to go to different locations and talk in person at universities or GDGs at different places around the world, and so which I really enjoy, and getting to meet people in person. So I look forward to being able to do that again, hopefully next year.
Thank you very much.
Sure. I don't know the best technologies or best approach to solve a problem, so I guess my proposal would not be the best. I mean, just put what you just kind of put how you think you would tackle it, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be right? It's just kind of like they want to see that you're trying and that you're putting some effort into it, right? So I think that's probably more important. Again, check out our section on how to write a proposal, because I think it gives a lot of good advice in a very, like I said, it's 1 page essentially, maybe 1.5 actually, of to kind of wrap your head around what they're looking for, and also shows things to avoid, right? All right, it looks like Nima, you got one more question. Do we have to put our IRC name? I mean, if they're using IRC, then I mean, you could come up with a different name if you want. I'm not sure if you're, or have one if we don't have. No, I mean, they know, especially with IRC, right? A lot of folks don't. A lot of younger folks don't even know what IRC is anymore. So don't worry about that if you don't. It's kind of the precursor to Slack and Discourse. It's been around for like 20 plus years, maybe 30 or plus at this point. Yeah, so don't worry about it. Most of these you can communicate even without having whatever, I guess Slack, you have to have some sort of an account, I think. I don't use Slack, obviously. But I believe that you do probably to any kind of those chat rooms type things, you usually have to have some kind of an account. But I think you just can do that in like 2 minutes, right, online. So any other questions? This is great. We've had about 10 or 15 minutes of questions. This is great. The worst is when I give a presentation and no one has a question, because I know I have not gone over all the information. So I'm like, okay, that's not good. So I'm very happy that y'all are asking questions. Okay, I think we might be done.
Seems we don't have much things at all.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you really very much.
Yeah. Thank you all. I hope to see you apply this year. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at that gsoc-support@google.com address as well, which that email address is also available in the contact section of our main homepage. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
بكرة بكرة انه بعد الميد نايت ولا بكرة الصبح؟ ماشي. Thank you.